Hi, this is Sebastien Braxton, and welcome back to Verse by Verse. This is episode number 5, and we're looking at the second day of creation. In this particular day, the Bible says that God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters." Thus God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. Now, this is another interesting fact about God's intention on division. God divided the first day in terms of light and darkness. He divided light and darkness by time. Light was the day and darkness was the night, based upon the revolution of the earth. But in day 2, God divides by space, height specifically. So he takes the waters that were there in the earth and he divides them by this particular firmament, what he calls heaven, or what we would call the sky, which would eventually create the atmosphere above and the oceans underneath. So now God is not necessarily dividing things, but he's taking something that was unified and he's dividing it and saying, one is for below and one is for above. So that means that something that was a height to someone was actually a floor to another. In other words, God is trying to show us, as he talks about in Revelation 17 and verse 15, that waters can be a symbol in the Bible, specifically in prophecy, of people, multitudes, and nations. That means as highly populated peoples exist on the earth, God is able and willing to divide them by this firmament, this expanse across. And he says that we should be able to be those waters above the earth, while others are waters on the earth, thinking very earthly minded, while those who are heavenly minded are walking high above. In other words, God is trying to show us that there are some things that are heights to other people, but that are floors to a Christian. To those who follow God, people may say in the world that the very height is to go to Harvard, or the very height is to attend some great conference and to be a part of some select group of people. But that is the very floor of a Christian and of a person who is heavenly minded. But it also lets us know that as we continue to follow God, that there are some things that ought to be below us. There are some things that should be beneath us. See, this communicates the fact that when we're getting into conflict with a roommate or with a family member or with a friend or maybe a colleague at work, and as we're having conflicts and we say, man, this person did something that was super petty, and all of a sudden we decide to come down to their level, but we have to recognize that as followers of Christ, some things ought to be beneath us. Some things ought to be below us. But here's an even greater insight. What if the very fact that because God's thoughts are higher than our own thoughts, what if our ceiling was actually God's floor? That his ideal for us was so much higher than we ourselves can conceive. You see, we are called as Christians to live by higher principles, by nobler aims, and by greater callings. May the Lord help us to embrace that, to walk above the world and sin.